Hi, and welcome to An American's Guide to Government with me, Professor Jen. Today, we are going to talk about how the U.S. federal government is organized. So we're going to do a high-level overview of the U.S. Constitution, and then we're going to explore in a little bit more detail the three branches of government that our Constitution creates. The mission of this video series is to unite us as Americans and to restore our faith in our country by examining our nation's core principles and recognizing that we've got a beautiful, unique system of government that can be a force for good. And the first step in this process is to understand how our government is structured. That structure is found in the U.S. Constitution, which creates the fundamental framework of our system of government. While the Declaration of Independence broke us away from England and the Articles of Confederation first bound us together as the beginnings of a nation, it's the U.S. Constitution that is our true founding document. The Constitution was signed on September 7, 1787, ratified by the states, and it went into effect in March of 1789. And it's really important that the Constitution begins with we, the people, because it shows that the government is intended to be accountable to us, the people. It doesn't govern pursuant to the divine right, as kings did. It governs pursuant to the will of us, the people. And think about how novel that idea was back in the late 1700s, that the common people, the governed, were the source of governmental authority, that the common people had rights and liberties upon which the government could not infringe. That was a radical concept. So was the fact that the Constitution was written intending to be understood by the average American, regardless of social background. The U.S. government was truly intended to be a government of the people, for the people. And although the people meant something different back in the 1700s than it does today, historical documents indicate that the framers did intend the Constitution to be a living document that would be adaptable to the times as they changed. One reason that we know the Constitution was intended to be adaptable is that it contains within itself the process for amending it. But what exactly does the Constitution do? As I said before, it creates a government accountable to the people. It does this by fostering a complex form of majority rule that is combined with a respect for and a recognition of minority rights. It separates the powers of government into three co-equal branches: the legislative branch, which creates the law, the executive branch, which carries out the law, and the judicial branch, which interprets the law. It's worth noting that the Articles of Confederation created a government with only one branch, the legislature, and that turned out to be insufficient. So the framers of the Constitution learned from that mistake, and they created a government of three branches for stability. The system of checks and balances written into the Constitution are intended to keep any single branch from becoming too powerful. Recall that the Constitution was intended to bring together many state governments. That meant that the Constitution had to respect those state governments, and thus it divides power between the federal and state governments in what we call a federalist system. The Constitution thus defines the scope and the limits of the federal government's power, leaving all remaining authority to the states and to the people. And speaking of the people, the Constitution provides a system for electing representatives to represent our interests. And the Constitution outlines many of our civil rights and liberties, and it prohibits the government from infringing on those rights and liberties. So let's take a closer look at how our government is organized. So you can see here that we've got three separate branches of government: legislative, executive, and judicial. The Constitution created Congress, a body comprised of the House of Representatives and the Senate, as the legislative branch. It created the positions of president and vice president in the executive branch, along with a reference to all civil officers of the United States. And it created the Supreme Court, but it specifically allowed Congress to create additional courts and place them in the judicial branch beneath the Supreme Court. But our government is more than just the top levels of those three branches. It is also the various components within those branches. The executive branch is headed by the president, but our country is far too large for one person to effectively run it. And that's why executive authority is delegated to cabinet departments, each headed by a secretary, except for the Department of Justice, which is headed by the Attorney General. There are currently 15 cabinet departments, including Department of Justice, State Department, Department of Defense, USDA, Health and Human Services, Department of Energy, and so forth. You can see the whole list in this org chart here. The Constitution does not create specific cabinet departments, but it does reference these departments because the Constitution permits the president to, quote, seek the opinion of the principal officer in each of the executive departments. The first Congress created the first four of these executive departments: State, War, Treasury, and the Post Office. And George Washington, as the first president of the United States of America, organized those departments into his cabinet. So each cabinet department has its own collection of agencies, which we will touch on momentarily. But first, in addition to the cabinet, modern presidents also enjoy the services of the Executive Office of the President. FDR created this office in 1939 at the recommendation of a presidential commission. The Executive Office of the President consists of a number of subsidiary offices, such as the White House Office, that is where we find the West Wing staff, the National Security Council, and the Office of Management and Budget. Historically, the Executive Office of the President has continued with the same personnel and policy programs even as presidential administrations change. That might strike you as odd, but it's not, because there's a need for qualified, knowledgeable career civil servants to inform newly elected officials and their staffs. There's that same need for career personnel in all those agencies that I just mentioned, the ones situated within various cabinet departments that make up the executive branch. To be sure, cabinet secretaries and the top officials of those agencies, those are political appointees. But the vast majority of agency personnel are career civil servants, and they are apolitical by design. And that is because agencies are supposed to carry out their work effectively, and while political changes can certainly impact agency policies and how those policies are implemented, a substantial amount of agency work remains the same regardless of what is happening in the political world. The Department of Energy's National Nuclear Security Administration, for example, will continue to secure our national nuclear weapons stockpile. It will continue to deploy response teams 100 or so times a year to check for radioactive materials at events like the Super Bowl. The FBI will continue to pursue people who commit federal crimes. The IRS is going to continue to collect taxes and issue tax returns. So those agencies, they operate regardless of who is in political power. But how do we get these agencies in the first place? The short answer is that Congress creates them. Congress passes a bill, which becomes a law when signed by the president, and that law establishes an agency and its powers. While Congress typically places these agencies in the executive branch, where they report up to a cabinet secretary, occasionally Congress will put agencies in the other branches. So, for example, there are legislative branch agencies like the Congressional Budget Office and the GAO, and judicial branch agencies like the U.S. Marshal Service and the U.S. Sentencing Commission. Congress also creates independent agencies like NASA, the CIA, and the Environmental Protection Agency. These agencies are still located within the executive branch. They are independent in that they don't report up to a cabinet secretary or to the executive office of the president. Among these independent agencies are 19 independent regulatory agencies, such as the Consumer Product Safety Commission, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, the Federal Communications Commission, and the Securities and Exchange Commission. These independent regulatory agencies are meant to create and enforce regulations without political interference. Because these federal agencies have a major impact on our daily lives, we're going to cover agencies and agency authority in more depth in a later video. You'll notice that the states and Native American tribal governments are missing, and that's because state and tribal governments were already in existence. The Constitution did not create state or tribal governments, but it does recognize their sovereignty and their rights. So the Constitution provides our government framework, and that is the framework of a democratic republic, also known as a representative democracy. It's important to understand that words like democracy and republic, they've got slightly different meanings now than they did when the Constitution was written and ratified. On the resources slide, I've included a link to an Atlantic article that does a pretty good job of explaining and defining those terms and how the founders intentionally created a representative democracy regardless of what we call it today. You've probably heard that Ben Franklin said that the founding fathers gave the people of America a republic if we could keep it. And this is often viewed as kind of a pithy comment, but Franklin was expressing real concerns about the balance of power and whether these three co-equal branches of government would actually respect each other's authority. Franklin knew that the first person to hold the presidency, George Washington, was a good person, but he worried about what might come afterwards. He actually said, "Nobody knows what sort may come afterwards." He voiced a concern that in the United States, as is everywhere else in the world at that time, the executive is always going to be increasing until basically it ends in a monarchy. And those are sobering words, so keep them in mind when we discuss executive branch authority, particularly the executive agencies that affect our daily lives. But before we do that, let's take a closer look at how the Constitution set up our three branches of government. In part 2, that's what we're going to talk about. We're also going to talk a little bit about the first 10 amendments to the Constitution, which is the Bill of Rights. So let's load up part 2 and get to it.